My name is Charlotte Reed, and last week, I stood at Boston Logan Airport watching my husband disappear behind the security gate. The overhead speakers called for boarding. People rushed past us, and I felt his hand slip from mine. He smiled, said this project in Toronto would only take 2 years, that when he returned, we'd finally have enough for a down payment on a house in Cambridge. I nodded, tears filling my eyes. The perfect picture of a devoted wife seeing her husband off for the sake of their future. Don't cry. Charlie, Adrian whispered against my hair, his voice steady and practiced. You know I'll call every night. I looked up at him and said, just promise me 2 years won't change you. He laughed softly, brushing my cheek with his thumb. 2 years won't even touch us. I wanted to believe him. The way he looked at me. Anyone would have. The moment he turned away, I memorized the shape of his back. The confident stride of a man sure of his lies. When he disappeared into the crowd, I didn't chase after him. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the tile, each step echoing louder than the next. In the cab, the driver glanced at me in the mirror and said, "Rough goodbye," I answered without hesitation. "The roughest?" He smiled kindly. "Don't worry. A good man always comes back." I turned my face to the window and whispered, "Let's hope he doesn't." The city blurred by news, the Charles River gleaming under the morning light. And I felt something inside me shift, like the air had changed and taken love with it. When I got home, the apartment felt hollow, the silence too loud to ignore. Adrian's slippers sat neatly by the door, his coffee mug on the counter. Everything still pretending to belong to a marriage that had already died. I sat on the couch, pulled out my phone, and opened our joint account. The balance glared back at me, $612,000. Every cent of our 5 years together. My thumb hovered only a second before I entered the transfer code. The screen flashed, transfer successful. My pulse steadied. My tears dried. And I whispered to the empty room, "Goodbye, Adrian." He thought he was leaving Boston to build a future. He never realized that day. I began building my freedom. 3 days before Adrian's flight, I left work early with the idea of surprising him. The air outside felt bright, harmless, the kind of afternoon that made trust feel easy. As I turned the corner near the South End Cafe, I saw him walking out with Sienna Brooks, her arm looped through his, laughter spilling between them like an inside joke. He leaned down, brushed her cheek with a kiss, and she tilted her face toward him as if they'd done it 100 times before. I didn't call out. I stood still until they walked away, my stomach tight and hollow. That night, when Adrian came home and kissed me hello, I smiled and asked about his team meeting. He said it went long, that they were finalizing his travel papers, that he was exhausted from the workload. I nodded, served dinner, and listened to the sound of his fork on the plate while my pulse beat in my ears. The next morning, I called a friend from college who now worked in law. I said quietly, "Do you know anyone discreet?" She gave me the number of a private investigator named Eli Ward, a former financial crimes officer who handled infidelity cases. When we met that afternoon, he studied me across the table and asked, "What exactly are you hoping to find?" I said, "Proof. I need to know what's real." He leaned back, eyes steady. "If he's lying, there'll be a trail. There always is." Eyes. I gave him the details he asked for: the bank account, the travel itinerary, the work contact he'd mentioned. Eli's brow furrowed as he wrote it all down. "You said all your paychecks go into the joint account?" he asked. I nodded. "How much is in there?" "Around 6,120,000. I said. He tapped his pen. "Then let's start there. I went home that evening and stared at our framed wedding photo. He was holding my hand in the picture, both of us smiling at the camera. It looked so real, so permanent. I finally turned the frame face down and whispered, "Let's see what the truth costs." A week later, Eli called and asked me to meet him at a small cafe in Beacon Hill. When I arrived, he slid a thick envelope across the table and said, "Everything you asked for is in there." I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a photograph of Adrian and Sienna standing in front of a real estate office, signing a contract. Their hands touched on the paper, their smiles identical. My voice came out steady when I asked, "Is that in Toronto?" Eli nodded. 2 weeks ago. They're listed as co-signers on a lease. He told the broker he was relocating permanently. 2. Inside the file were more photos. Adrian and Sienna shopping for furniture, dining together, her hand resting easily on his shoulder. "They don't look like coworkers," I said. Eli didn't flinch. "They're not. They've been seeing each other for 3 months. There's also a record of several transfers from your joint account to a Canadian bank under his name." He pointed to the statement. "He's already moved close to $18,000. I stared at the printout, each line a blow to my chest. He said it was for travel expenses. I murmured. "No," Eli replied. "It's for a down payment on a condo. The deed is in his name and hers." Ah. He handed me another sheet, screenshots of text messages. Adrian had written, "Once Charlotte signs the authorization, the rest will clear," Sienna replied. "She's easy. You said she never checks statements." I asked quietly. "They planned this together?" Eli met my eyes. "From the start." He closed the folder and asked, "What do you want to do with this?" I looked at the evidence spread between us and said, "I'm taking back what's mine." He leaned forward. "If you withdraw all the funds, it's legal. It's a joint account. But once he notices, he'll come after you." I said, "He won't find what's already gone." 1. Eli hesitated. "Do you have a lawyer?" I nodded. "Not yet. But I will." He scribbled a name on a napkin. "Martha Collins. She specializes in marital assets. Tell her I sent you." I folded the napkin, tucked it into my bag, and said, "I don't want revenge. I want precision." He nodded once. "Then start now." I gathered the papers, the photos, and the texts. And as I walked out, the envelope felt heavier than truth itself. The world outside looked unchanged, but every step I took felt like a countdown. By the time I reached the corner, I already knew what to do next. Martha Collins's office overlooked the gray skyline of downtown Boston. All glass and clean lines. She listened without interrupting as I laid out the story from the first transfer to the photographs Eli had given me. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "If you have documented proof of his affair and asset movement, we can request a temporary restraining order on the funds and file for divorce immediately." I said, "I've already moved the money to my personal account." Her brows lifted slightly. "Was the account joint?" "Yes," I replied. "Then you're within your rights," she said. "But we'll need to show the majority of that balance came from your income." I handed her 5 years of pay stubs and bank statements. She scanned them and said, "Good. This establishes contribution. We'll draft a petition citing marital misconduct and financial deception." I asked, "Can he claim I stole the funds?" She shook her head. "No. Joint ownership gives both parties equal control. But his use of those funds to buy foreign property in secret is a violation of fiduciary duty." I exhaled for the first time in days. "What happens next?" she said. "We file before he has the chance to make any countermove. Timing is everything." I said. I don't want him to know yet. She nodded. Then he won't. The court can serve him electronically after the filing. Until then, silence is your best defense. I studied the divorce petition she slid across the desk. My name beside his. The black ink sharp and final. It's strange, I murmured. Seeing the end of something that never really existed. Martha said quietly. It existed for you. That's enough reason to end it properly. I signed, the pen pressing hard enough to leave an imprint through the paper. As she gathered the documents, she said, I'll file these tomorrow morning. Don't answer his calls if he contacts you. Once he's notified. Everything you say can be used in discovery. I nodded. He won't hear from me again. She extended her hand. You've done the hardest part already. I stood, meeting her gaze. No, I said. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. I left her office with the folder tucked under my arm, the city lights flickering against the windows outside. By the time I reached the street, the wind had turned cold. But for the first time in weeks, my hands were steady. The call came late, just after midnight. His name flashing across the screen like a habit I hadn't broken yet. I answered, my voice calm. Steady? Almost rehearsed. Adrian sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. His tone sliding easily into charm. Hey, I just wanted to hear your voice, he said. The hum of city noise faint behind him. Toronto's everything they promised. I wish you could see the place big windows. Great view. Feels like a new start, I said. You sound happy. And he laughed softly. You'd love it here. Charlie, maybe I'll fly you out once I'm settled. 2, I asked. Did you find an apartment already? He hesitated a beat before saying, yeah. Company's covering it. Temporary housing. Executive package. I smiled even though he couldn't see it. That's nice. You must have signed something official then, he chuckled. Just routine paperwork. The camera shifted, showing a framed print behind him, a minimalist painting. Black brushstrokes on white. I recognized it instantly from one of Eli's photos. Hanging on the same wall behind Sienna. My pulse didn't change. My breath didn't break. That's a beautiful piece, I said. You and I never had art like that. He glanced back. Oh, that? It came with the place. Convenient, I said. He leaned closer to the screen. You seem distant. Everything okay back home? I said. Everything's perfect. His eyes softened. Good. Keep it that way till I get back. Don't make any big moves. I smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. We talked about nothing for another minute. Boston weather. Old friends. The same domestic noise of two people pretending not to know the truth. When he finally said, I'll call again tomorrow. I nodded. I'll be here. Dime. After the call ended, I sat in the dim light of the kitchen. The silence familiar. Almost kind. I opened my laptop, attached the photo of his condo lease to an email, and wrote only 2 lines. He's settled. Proceed with filing. My finger hovered over send for a moment before I clicked. The message vanished. Clean and irreversible. Somewhere in Toronto. He probably poured another drink. Still convinced he was ahead. The hearing was scheduled on a cold Tuesday morning. The kind of day that made the courthouse feel heavier than usual. Martha sat beside me. Calm and deliberate. Her voice steady as she said, We'll let the documents speak. Don't react. No matter what he says. Adrian didn't come in person. His lawyer appeared on screen while he sat somewhere in Toronto. His image projected on the monitor across from me. The judge glanced between us and said, Let's begin. Adrian's attorney opened first. His tone clipped. My client believes Mrs. Reed withdrew joint funds without consent and intends to claim financial misconduct. Martha leaned forward slightly and answered, Your client's consent wasn't required for a joint account. But his own misconduct is well documented. Attorney Doc. The judge turned to Martha. You mentioned supporting evidence? She handed over the folder. Page after page of transfers, photographs, and text messages. Exhibit A through D, she said. The opposing attorney scoffed. Screenshots are hardly credible, Martha replied. Metadata confirms time, location, and device IDs, all verifiable. The judge adjusted his glasses, reading silently before saying, Mr. Blake, do you deny these communications? Adrian's image flickered as he leaned forward. They're taken out of context, he said sharply. That condo wasn't a secret. It was an investment. Martha's voice cut through him like glass. An investment purchased using marital funds without his spouse's knowledge, registered jointly with his mistress, and concealed under false pretenses. I believe that's called fraud. I finned. The courtroom grew still. Adrian's lawyer tried again. Even so, the money originated from both parties, Martha countered. Our records show over 70% of that balance was deposited directly from Mrs. Reed's salary. Every pay stub supports it. The judge nodded slowly. Mr. Stalker. Blake. The court finds sufficient cause to grant a temporary asset freeze pending review. Adrian's voice rose through the speaker. She's lying. She's stealing what's mine. I turned toward the screen. My tone quiet. You already did that for both of us. 80. The judge tapped his gavel once. That's enough. The motion stands. Martha leaned closer to me and whispered, You just won the first round. I nodded. Not smiling. Not relieved. Just finished. Outside. The hallway was quiet except for footsteps fading in every direction. Martha said, We'll get the final hearing in 4 weeks. Until then, don't contact him, I said. He'll reach out first. She gave a thin smile. Then let him. Every word he sends only builds our case. I walked out of the courthouse, the cold air biting at my face. Somewhere in Toronto, Adrian was realizing for the first time that silence could be louder than fury. 6 months passed before I saw him again. He reached out from a new number, asking to meet, saying he was back in Boston for closure. I chose the cafe where everything had started, the one in Beacon Hill, where I'd once opened that envelope of proof. When he walked in, he looked smaller somehow, though he still tried to wear that same polished confidence. He smiled like we were old friends. You look good, he said. I answered. Freedom suits me. He sat down, uninvited, and said, I just wanted to apologize. Things got messy, but it wasn't supposed to go that way. I stirred my coffee slowly and said, You mean the part where you drained my savings? Or the part where you got caught? He exhaled, trying for charm. You don't understand. The Toronto deal was real. I just needed capital. You'd have benefited too if you'd trusted me. I met his eyes. Trust died the moment you co-signed a lease with someone else. His jaw tightened. Sienna meant nothing. It was business. Then business must have been good. I said, You paid for her condo, her car, and her silence. His eyes flicked up sharply. You think you won because of that court stunt? I've got new investors. I'll be fine. I reached into my bag and slid an envelope toward him. Then you might want to read this first. I don't. He frowned, opening it. Inside were the Canadian court documents, stamped and dated. detailing an ongoing investigation into his company's fraudulent transfers. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice suddenly lower. "Public record," I said. "Apparently, your investors didn't like fake invoices." His face drained of color. "You had something to do with this." I shook my head. "No. Adrienne, you did. You just sent the wrong receipts to the wrong bank." He pushed back his chair, ready to leave. But I said, "You can run again if you want. But they'll find you. They always do." He froze for a moment, then walked out without another word. A week later, the news broke. Former tech executive Adrian Blake arrested in Toronto on charges of financial fraud. I watched the broadcast alone in my kitchen, the same place where I'd first hit transfer. The reporter's voice was detached, almost bored, as if his story had already ended. When the screen went dark, I closed my laptop and whispered his name once, just to hear how empty it sounded. The silence that followed felt clean. A year later, I opened a small cafe in Cambridge. I called it Reclaim. A quiet place, with no music before noon, and too much light in the afternoons. One morning, Ryan stopped by with 2 coffees and said, "You did it." I smiled. I just needed something that was mine. He looked around at the space, the worn wood and calm air, and said, "It feels like peace." I nodded. "That's exactly what it is." Oh. At the corner table, a young woman sat alone, her hands shaking as she stared at her phone. When I brought her a refill, she whispered, "I just found out my boyfriend's been lying for months." I set the cup down gently and said, "Then you've already done the hardest part." She frowned. "What's that?" "Finding the truth." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes still wet. "Does it get better?" I said. "It gets real. That's better than better." Ah. After she left, I wiped the table and caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who once cried at an airport gate. She had edges now. But they weren't sharp, they were steady. Outside, the street hummed with morning noise, and I felt the kind of stillness that doesn't come from silence but from surviving. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to rebuild from the ruins of trust, remember, peace isn't something you find, it's something you choose. One day at a time. Follow this channel to share your own stories of starting over, of strength, of finding calm after the storm.